Part 17. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 162. Coming out of the house, Eric's wallet was almost full. Inside was a bag of gold coins he had just won. Sira held the heavy gold coins and returned them to him, feeling a little depressed. She didn't know how Eric in the game treated Anashi at the end. She hadn't read the entire book carefully or passed the game. She knew nothing about his ending. As she spent more time here, she often thought about whether the paper people were really just paper people to her. Their emotional changes always fluctuate with her choices, and their future lives seem to be closely related to her. But she behaved like a player from beginning to end, controlling everyone's emotions in order to save her life, and never showed her sincerity. Is this really right? Eat something. Eric used the money he won to buy her milk and bread. He still had a piece in his mouth and said vaguely, "What are you thinking about?" Sierra ate the soft bread and held the warm glass bottle. "I miss you." She raised her eyes and looked at the bruise on his face that had just been accidentally hit, and pressed the warm milk bottle on it with some distress. "I don't care how much money you have, Eric." He quickly swallowed the bread, wrapped his big palm around her hand holding the milk bottle, and said with a smile, "I know, and you also know that I can't be compared with the other two." Compared with Eric's many advantages, money is nothing in Sierra's eyes. She pursed her lips and finally showed her teeth with a smile. "Okay, I will support you in whatever you want to do. I hope you won't live like yourself because of me." "That's not right." In the dim street, the young man leaned down, his brown eyes as bright as stars, full of hope. "Everything I do can bring me closer to you, then it will be worth the effort. I have never made such a sure choice. I only have one wish, that is, your choice will not let me down." These were the next words Eric said as he sent her home. Sira turned around in front of the door. He was still riding the black horse, smiling at her from a distance. It seemed that as long as she would stop and look back, he would always be waiting for her. Sira entered the door and her eyes became calm. The new week has come and the school day has come again. The fountain where Bernice fell to her death has been washed clean, but there is still dark red blood stains in the gaps between some tiles. From the moment Sierra entered the school, those who had bullied her and who had been bystanders all greeted her without exception, with awe and embarrassment at the smile on their faces. Scandals have spread all over the place between Mrs. Jiaoqian and Anna 11, and their personalities have completely collapsed. Apart from buying land to set up a factory last week, the mother and daughter have not even been seen on the street. Sira, who was supposed to be waiting for Lucid to come to class, did not see him until school ended in the evening. This is true from Monday to Tuesday. This is very strange. According to his character, he will not let go of this kind of time to get along with her. "Did Mr. Lucid take leave?" Sierra went to the office and said curiously. "That's right. He is also my family pianist now. Dad wants to see him at night. He took a week off. It seems something happened to a relative at home." Sierra walked out of school, gave Joey a list of addresses, and went straight to Lucid's home. He had no relatives at all, and he only brought 2 fish ashore this time. What happened? The iron door outside the small courtyard was unlocked. She walked in and went up the steps and was about to knock on the door. The dark painted door in the corner opened, revealing a delicate and unfamiliar face. Sarah had a chance encounter with him, and the mermaid next to Lucid was not Zachary, but Terry. "I want to ask." Lucid halfway through his words, he was interrupted by the other party in a bad temper. "Zachary was captured at the weekend night. We searched all day yesterday and just got the news today. The leader is on his way. He knows you are coming and asked me to stay here to let you know." "You're so good, how could you be suddenly taken away?" Sierra frowned. "So I have to ask you, have you disclosed our information to the humans who captured the mermaids?" Terry's eyes were full of defense, and his body had a fierce aura. I didn't, there's no way I could do that, she denied immediately. The leader is only wary of you. Only you know our secrets. Terry walked to the door and threw the key to her. I'm going to find him now. This room is at your disposal. Sierra put away the key and immediately thought of Anaxi. Wait a minute, did my sister, a girl, come to see Lucid last weekend? No, no one has been here. In other words, when she and Eric were playing in the water, Anaxi did not go to Lucid to practice piano as she said, so where did she go? Terry walked down the steps and came to the iron gate of the yard. He turned back and said, but a girl came here this morning and told the leader where Zachary was transported. The hair color is a little lighter than mine, and she looks very weak. She is similar to me, right? Sierra suddenly had a guess in her mind. Was it Anna 11's deliberate trap in order to increase her favorability? Her guess was indeed good. Her favorability score with Roxid was already negative by 10 points. Because of Anaxi's timely reporting of the information directed and acted by herself, the favorability score increased by 5 points. For her, who had already been negative for a long time, is a big good thing. This wave of wool was really picked up by her. The person who could capture Zachary must be familiar with mermaids, and in the town of Wally, besides Edward and Thomas, she couldn't think of anyone else who would do this. In particular, the guns worn by the two men were produced by the arsenal in the capital, and were inseparable from the powerful people there. This is a troublesome matter, and I don't know how Logozide will deal with it. It is very likely that he will pursue him and kill him, and he will be seriously injured. Sierra suppressed her temper and walked home at sunset. Anashi was playing cheerful tunes on the new piano in the piano room. She pushed the door open and found that Xander was there, and the two of them got along very harmoniously. Where did Edward take Zachary? Sierra asked straight to the point. Seeing her, Anaxi's fingers paused and missed the beat. Who is Zachary? How do I know? She stopped her hand calmly. They are very busy with their academic research, and it is possible for them to travel around capital. Sierra looked coldly, not caring that there was another person in the room. You told them the secret and then went back to Luziad to provide information. What on earth are you talking about? Anaxi frowned and said, going out with Eric, are you going crazy? Sarah's fingers pressed against the keys, making a piercing noise. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Gui Cheng. Chapter 163. She leaned down and whispered amidst the piercing music, they don't know how to hunt killer fish. You let Logosiet go alone. What if he dies? Have you thought about the consequences? Anaxi was stunned for a moment, and a panicked look flashed across her face. How could he be injured? Damn it, it was her who caused this sudden mess. Sierra held back her anger. He originally split his legs and came to land. How much do you think his abilities will be reduced when creatures from the sea come ashore? Anaxi panicked. Her original intention was just to gain a good impression, but she never thought about turning Roxed into a mermaid specimen. Her simple brain had not yet thought of that level. Anyway, now that I have earned the points, it doesn't matter if I reveal it at all. Okay, I do know a little bit, but I also heard from my father. It is said that they caught a mermaid near the Lucid house on the weekend night. Their unique blue eyes are so easy to identify. I should go to the Marine Academy now. On the way to headquarters, I heard again that Anaxi's ability to fool people was extraordinary. Sierra immediately turned around and went out, and Anaxi followed closely and said, what's the point of going, they won't listen to you. Sierra couldn't hold it back and replied in the corridor, sometimes I really don't understand what kind of idiot it is to write such a brainless character like you. While Anaxi was stunned, Sierra had disappeared, and Xander was still in the strange conversation between the two. Why did she say you wrote it? At the same time, Sierra had no idea that what she said when she was angry would bring new changes to Anaxi's system and bring a new crisis to herself. Anaxi was still standing motionless in the corridor, watching a strange line of words appear on the screen in front of her. After the system capture is completed, a bug character Sarah appears. Please cooperate with the host to clear the virus and continue to complete the strategy mission. Glitch character Sierra? What's the meaning? This is the first time Anaxi has seen such a prompt. Why is it said that Sarah is malfunctioning? Could it be said that if she dies, everything she should have can really be restored? Her eyes gradually became weird, and when Sander looked at the innocent and lovely beauty, he suddenly gave a creepy smile. She suddenly felt that the two sisters in Mawson Manor were a little abnormal. Sierra rode a horse all the way to Kalida's house and told her the whole story. The other party called her father at the bank and took her in the car without saying a word. They went by train. There was no ferry to the capital yesterday. I checked the train schedule. It's only 1 day and 1 night. We can take a shortcut to catch up. Seeing her wringing her handkerchief in excitement, Sierra couldn't help but say, "You are more excited than me." Khalida turned her head with her unique starry eyes. "Heroes save beauties. Once I become a hero, that mermaid named Zachary might be willing to live in my pool. I really like them. He looks half human and half tail." Sierra looked at her for a long time, then looked at the large group of people just hired from the bodyguard company behind the car, and nodded silently. A sister with money-making abilities can help her solve problems at any time. Mr. Lizzie was so used to it when he heard that Sierra stayed up all night again, he didn't even bother to ask the reason. His heart was full of disappointment. Including their own cars, a total of 10 cars chased Edward and Thomas halfway through the night. At this time, the two of them didn't know it yet, so they booked a train dining car with others, and a bloody tail was half exposed in the black plastic bag. It turns out our guess was right. Thomas held the small jar of collected saliva with his eyes obsessed. Their saliva has the most perfect healing power. According to previous reports, they can change their tails by swallowing a kind of grass and touching the sea water transformed into a prototype. It is simply a godlike creature. Edward walked to the window, took out the soft plugs in his ears and put them in his pocket, then took out a pack of cigarettes, lit one, and sighed. Fortunately, their ability to dissolve on land has been greatly reduced. "We have made a fortune, and there are 2 more on Wally's Street," Thomas said, "but they have to stay to find out the location of the mysterious island, where there are groups of mermaids living there for us to hunt. The one we first caught at Mr. Lizzie's house is still there." Edward took another puff of cigarette, "but I can't figure out why it came back after it was probably let go by Miss Sarah." Thomas thought for a while. Is there a possibility that he will also fall in love with humans? Otherwise, how can we explain that he is willing to turn into legs and return to the land? The reproductive structures of mermaids are different and the language is blocked, so love cannot mate with humans. Not necessarily. My father has only caught 1 female mermaid. The structure is similar to that of a female. I think the male should also be wrapped inside the scales. As soon as they finished speaking, both of them turned their attention to the bloody tail. They didn't notice at all that a black figure jumped up from the woods nearby and jumped on top of the speeding train. Lux's silver hair was wildly blown by the wind, and he clasped his claws on the iron sheet and crawled forward. The tied-up Zachary was dragged out by several strong men with guns. There were several bloody holes in his body, and all the blood on his already pale face was gone. When Loosied saw that they were still trying to violate him, he put his claws on the glass window, opened his mouth with an angry smile, and scratched the window to pieces. He jumped into the car while hanging upside down from the top, grabbed the back of the neck of a man who was not in a hurry to avoid him, crushed his bones and pushed him aside. "Ah! It's coming! Shoot!" A series of frightened screams began to boil. The ferocious mermaid raised a table with one hand as a shield to block bullets, and attacked the people around him with precision. "Sea water! Edward brought some sea water on the road just in case, and he would directly order someone to splash it on Rawside. His exposed skin inevitably came into contact, and his khaki trousers instantly made a sound of fabric tearing. Dense black scales squeezed out of the rags like steel knives. A giant fish tail of about 3 meters was flexibly bent like a twisted snake. The unfolded tail fin directly swept the two surrounding shooters onto the carriage. He growled at Edward and Thomas, who were huddled in the corner. The two people who had put on their earplugs again were not affected, and no one in the entire carriage was affected. On the contrary, Lockheed was caught and shot twice. Shoulders and abdomen. He whined, and his normal human pupils transformed into vertical pupils due to anger, and his body turned into a sharp arrow and rushed straight towards the two instigators. Blood splattered all over the car windows, and the loud noise inside caused people in the car behind to knock on the door to ask about the situation. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 164. Blood splattered all over the car windows, and the loud noise inside caused people in the car behind to knock on the door to ask about the situation. It's only 3 o'clock in the morning, what are you doing? The train conductor heard that something had happened in the dining compartment, and received another radio call from the company, asking him to stop the train. The long train leading to the capital stopped as it was about to enter the tunnel. Sierra and the others worked tirelessly to take the shortcut, passed through a rice field path, and finally caught up with the train that was forced to stop. Many people gathered at the door of the train restaurant near the head where they ate. The green sky turned white, and the large convoy stopped in front of the train. Khalida breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Dad's phone call worked. Unsurprisingly, the banknote ability once again played a huge role. Sierra held a small medicine box and ran from car to car. Lawside. Where are you? After communicating with the train driver at the front of the car, Khalida shouted at her, in the train restaurant. Something happened over there. Sarah immediately climbed into a carriage. At the door of one of the train restaurants, there were only a few chefs and train police standing on both sides. A large pool of blood flowed from the crack of the door. Her pupils shrank. She walked through the luxurious leather seats and took the police officer's key. I'll drive it. It's very dangerous inside. Someone was asking us for help just now, but now there's no movement. The policeman hesitated to hand her the key. Khalida arrived with a group of bodyguards and said domineeringly, give it to her. Seeing that the other party was outnumbered and approaching menacingly, the key fell into Sierra's hands in an instant. She inserted it into the lock, and the bodyguards behind her raised their guns to deal with any accidents that might happen later. The moment the door opened, everyone was startled. The entire dining car, the ceiling, floor, and windows were covered with thick blood, and more than a dozen corpses lay on the floor. Including Edward and Thomas, everyone died miserably, leaving no one alive. Luo Sied was hiding behind a sofa full of bullet holes. Half of the black fish tail was exposed and soaked in blood. The scales were rolled up and blood was flowing out. Lying in the middle of the aisle was Zachary, who was tied up and looked seriously injured. Oh my God, why does this person have a tail? The people outside covered their mouths in shock, never expecting to see such a weird and bloody scene. A snow-white webbed claw suddenly rested on the top of the sofa, the fish's tail retracted and curled up, and the profile of a profile was slowly revealed behind the seat. The humanoid monster pressed its eyelashes. There was a layer of light shadow under its eyes, its light gray eyelashes were stained with blood drops, and it slowly turned its face. Sierra's heart trembled uncontrollably, and her nose immediately became sore, luxed. A face with half-covered silver hair appeared in front of everyone. The face was impeccably stained by blood. The lake blue eyes were covered with a translucent film, causing the bright colors to become a little blurred, like a gem that had lost its sparkle. She walked towards him quickly. The mermaid moved her lips and said inaudibly, "It's okay." Sierra walked around the seat and was quickly stimulated by the scene in front of her. Half of Logosied's clothes were in tatters, and there were all traces of bullets passing through him. The place where the tail was transformed and stretched out had several holes because it blocked the bullets, and the tail fin was damaged. "That's it," and he still said it's okay. She held onto his shoulder in distress, her eyes red. There were so many wounds that she didn't know what to do. This was the first time Khalida saw Zachary with his tail exposed. Beautiful things were ruined like this, and she felt distressed and ran over to untie him while holding up her skirt. The bodyguard he brought saw that he had nothing to do, so he stood guard at the door. When Lashid saw someone approaching Zachary, he just softened and raised his dorsal fin again, and growled threateningly at her. Sira immediately hugged him, who was tense all over, and comforted him. "That's my companion, don't worry, she brought me to save you." After hearing what she said, Logosied looked at Khalida warily and said in a hoarse voice, "I know her." Seeing him relax, Sierra turned back and said, "We have to get out of here first." Khalida looked at Zachary, who was also staring at her in a daze, and said distressedly, "But what to do with these corpses they made? It will definitely be on the news tomorrow because mermaids kill humans." Compared with other ladies, Khalida showed no emotion at all when she saw these corpse fragments. She looked like she was used to it, and she was extremely calm and thinking about solutions. Sira thought for a moment, then held Roxid's face again. "Do you still have the ability? Trick them into forgetting our existence tonight and turn this place into an unexplained murder." 5 minutes later, Lucid's powerful bewitching ability weakened the impression of the mermaid outside the carriage. They only knew that something had killed many people, but they could not remember what it was. Several bodyguards put the two mermaids into the car and rushed to the nearest seaside. The healing power of mermaids in water is very strong, this is what Logosied told Sira, so she soaked half of her body in the water, and using the bright light of the morning, she lowered her head with pliers to help him pick out the bullets from his flesh and blood. Whether it was because the weather in the morning was too cold or the sea water was too biting, Sira's wrists kept shaking. The blood flowing out of rocks almost surrounded her, and the smell of blood even ushered in a few sharks. They swayed around the two of them in the shallow water, and then were caught by the mermaid with sharp webbed claws. They were thrown out with their bare hands and knocked all the way into the water until they were stunned and turned upside down. Sierra he restrained the sharpness of his nails, revealing the soft and smooth fingertips, and gently held the wrist of the pale girl in front of him. "Go back to the shore, and I will handle the rest by myself. If you didn't come back to me, nothing like this would have happened." Sierra broke away from his hand and stubbornly continued to search for bullet fragments in the white flesh. "Do you think I will regret this?" Logosied held her neck, forcing her to raise her head and look directly into his eyes. "You are in a panic now." "I'm just worried about you." Sierra was forced to stop and look at him, licking her dry lips. "Obviously not. I know you will never leave me, let alone regret it." Because of this, she felt very uncomfortable. After receiving a satisfactory answer, the mermaid smiled, and her face became a little softer. He loosened his hand and persuaded, "Then go back to the shore." To Sarah, "You will get frozen if you do this." Sierra shook her head. "I wasn't there when you had the accident, but now that you're injured I have to be there. It doesn't matter if you're sick, you'll heal me anyway." Logosied understood what the treatment she meant, and did not ask for it anymore. He only held her with one arm, his expression silent and focused. "I have an update today. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore." Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 165. After a while, he suddenly asked, "Is it a kiss?" Sierra didn't even look up. "Of course, we always do that." You can ask for more, I can do it. He bent to one side and rubbed the back of her neck intimately with his thin mandible. After digging out the bullet from Rox's abdomen, Sierra put her fingers against his lips, pried open his teeth, and easily scraped his mouth to bring out the liquid and applied it to the wounds. Are you really not afraid of death, Logoside? She asked funnily. You have been injured so badly, how can you still think about such a thing? I can't control it, you understand. His long tail moved under the water, bending silently and drawing the girl in. Sierra also felt that his position was convenient for her to deal with the wounds on her tail. After she had dealt with them all, she realized that she was surrounded. Those scales rubbed against her lower back and thighs, and a lot of blood was squeezed out from the ambiguous rubbing. She had to hold down the slippery tail and tried to bring up a topic. Your legs will turn into a tail when they touch the sea water. Can you change back later? You can do it after it dries. The tail continued to rub it non-stop. Stop moving, the shrapnel has been caught in you. Sierra couldn't help it anymore, and pressed a palm on a black scale under his abdomen, and a shallow moan suddenly came from Lucid's throat. Khalida, who was not far away from the two of them, was also soaking in the water, imitating Sierra's example of cleaning Zachary's wounds. When she heard the movement on their side, she turned around and asked, "What's wrong with your fish?" Even the cold sea water couldn't extinguish the flames rising above Sierra's head. It's okay. The physiological structure of the mermaid is very strange, and Sierra has no idea what is hidden under the scales she casually pressed. She retracted her hand like an electric shock, and secretly glared at the mermaid with a face full of comfort. His thin lips curled up, and the webbed paws gripped in the fine sand lifted up and pinched her face. Don't be angry, you pressed in the wrong place. She bit her lower lip and said in a cool tone, "Don't make that sound. There are many bodyguards watching behind you. Do you want them all to know that you are in heat?" Logosied really didn't mind others knowing about this kind of thing, but considering that the girl in the fishtail was thin-skinned, he pretended to be calm and shook his head. You can try again, I promise not to scream. Will she take the bait with such a tone that seduce a fool? She silently used some force to dig bullets into the fish's tail, which successfully made the mermaid in heat frown and hiss. Immediately, Sierra raised her head and showed a vengeful smile. Okay, open your mouth. Logosied obediently opened his mouth, let her fingertips scrape across his mouth and left, then pursed his lips as if in recollection, his tongue pressed against his cheek, and his slightly upward narrow eyes looked more charming and charming. Sierra couldn't bear it and turned her eyes away, looking at the sun rising from the end of the coastline. The sea surface was cut into pieces like a mirror, and a large number of fragments shone brightly. The mottled light and shadow reflected by the water softened her jawline. The girl hugged her knees and squinted her eyes slightly while soaking in the water. Her eyelashes cast a shadow on her eyelids, and her slender figure melted into the water like a dream. Logosied stared at her for a moment, then quickly grabbed her arm and held her tightly in his arms regardless of her exclamation. Sierra sat on his fishtail with her legs spread apart, trying to climb down in a panic. What are you doing? There are still many wounds on the fishtail. It's okay. He lowered his head, resting his chin on her shoulder, and said in a low voice, I just feel that the sunshine will take away your soul. Sierra's heart trembled, and her struggling movements became smaller. What did you say? The feeling of you sitting in the light seems to be disappearing. Logosied lowered his eyes, his tone was not as teasing and calm as before, but full of confusion about losing an important toy. Sierra smiled, No, you can find me no matter where I am. What she responded to was a rare silence from Logosied. He suddenly raised her hand and took a bite on the inside of the wrist bone. The mermaid's teeth were sharp and easily bit her into pieces, causing blood to bleed. He licked the blood droplets into his mouth. Sierra snatched her hand back and covered it. The saliva attached to it quickly stopped the bleeding. She frowned in pain. What are you doing? The names I used in the human world, including the name I once told you, Roxid, are not my real name. Roxid moved his lips and spoke a series of strange short words in a mermaid accent. Your real name. Syrah vaguely understood, but felt that something had changed. Suddenly, her heart palpitated violently. Her gaze on the water swayed, and she slowly covered her chest. It's so strange. This suffocating trance feeling is so strange. Logosied still said to her in the ancient mermaid language, life contract, no matter where you are, I can find you. After coming out of the water, Syrah's fingers were all wrinkled. There was a small wooden house by the beach. She and Khalida went to change into new clothes bought by the bodyguard and communicated with each other. Zakli told me, your merman just went into heat with you. Sierra's expression froze. How does he know? He said he smelled it. Sierra, dot. It seems you are making good progress. She changed the subject. Khalida smiled, a little proud. I think he fell in love with me at first sight. When I helped him handle the bullets, he didn't dare to look into my eyes. It's so innocent. Edward and Thomas are related to the Ocean Academy headquarters in the capital. Now that they are dead, there is no guarantee that they will send someone again. Do you have any good ideas? Sierra's information channels are definitely not as extensive as Khalida's, and she wants to hear from her views. My dad is in the capital. I asked him to help me pay attention to the movements of the Ocean Academy. If anything happens, I will call you as soon as possible. Sierra nodded. When they were about to get in the car and go home, another mermaid, Terry, arrived belatedly. He didn't understand the land routes, so it took a little more time to find them. Seeing Syrah standing next to Logosied, he looked carefully for a moment and understood something. He pursed his lips and followed them without saying a word. After they arrived in Wali, all of Rokid's wounds had healed, but just in case, he regained his strength and weakened the memories of these bodyguards to ensure that no one would reveal their identities. 15 days have passed, and as the weather has gotten hotter and hotter, Rosehill has not yet returned to Wali. The time has been much longer than the days he originally told Syrah. Lizzie's wedding is coming soon, and all the invitations have been sent out, but no one in the town has any blessings for the middle-aged couple. The new topic that everyone talks about the most is the newly opened Mawson laundry factory. Sierra had just finished class at etiquette school and was about to have dinner with Roxt. For the first time, the manager of the laundry factory was waiting at the door. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 166. You'd better come to the factory when you have time. I've been busy recently. He was hesitant to speak, and it was obviously not suitable to tell Logosied beside her. Can we have dinner together tomorrow? Sierra turned her head and spoke softly, with a hint of flattery. You don't need me to accompany you. Logosied was dissatisfied. No, I'll be fine. She straightened his clothes, then took his face and kissed him. Am I leaving? The etiquette school is not in a busy street, and Syrah is not afraid of being seen in the alley, and her actions instantly brighten the mood of the people in front of her. Logosied chuckled. Okay then, I'll ask Zachary to bring back some pastries for you tomorrow. Don't bother Zachary. Khalida is repairing the fish pond recently. He probably wants to measure the size. What? Logosied was confused for a moment. Sierra waved her hand and urged him to leave quickly. It's okay. Anyway, just let Terry go. I'll leave first. She hired a car and the laundry manager to arrive at the factory. When I walked into the factory, I found that the clothes baskets that were supposed to be stacked high were very empty. There were only a few clothes for the workers. Only half of the dozen female slaves were washing clothes, and the other half were doing nothing, cleaning the factory, or doing some handicrafts on their own clothes. Live. This was the first time for Sierra to see such a leisurely moment. We just passed by the newly opened Mawson laundry factory, and you saw it too, the manager whispered. the price there is half lower than ours. They are doing activities to take orders for clothes. Now we have only a few fixed. The customers, the railway and casual miners' clothing lists were all taken away by them. Half lower, Sierra asked curiously. I visited various places for laundry prices, and the one I finally settled on was already the lowest price. The money they earned was only supported by the minimum amount. How many black slaves did they hire? That's the problem. We make money by quantity, but the other party seems to have hired more than 30 black slaves, the manager replied with an annoyed look. I passed by the factory over there after work several times. I came to the factory at 5 o'clock, and the lights there were still on, and I stayed up all night. Sierra thought thoughtfully and came up with only one answer. My father and stepmother are desperate to use these black slaves. Can they have enough rest time or get paid? I have calculated an account, but there is none at present, the steward said. More than 30 black slaves need 5 or 6,000 gold coins. Our daily income in the past was only about 100 gold coins. They have just opened half a month ago, and they are far from there. Get your money back. No wonder you are so anxious. Sierra patted her arm, scratching again and again because of the summer mosquitoes. She looked up at the sweltering laundry factory, thought for a while and said, raise the price. If the quantity is not enough, we can't do a loss-making business and take orders from the rich. I also want to come to you to discuss this matter. If you agree, that would be great. Sierra nodded. You also go and talk to Khalida. She has a lot of connections and can help us attract a lot of people. I will give you another sum of money by the way. Ah. Sierra looked back at him. It's hot in the summer, so I spent a sum of money from my own pocket to provide ice cubes every day to cool down the factory. Will the cost be too high? The steward hesitated. The corners of Sierra's lips curled up, looking like a strategist. Don't panic, because something will happen to the Mawson laundry factory sooner or later. Before my old father hurts us, we must first build up our reputation. From now on, we will open the factory every Sunday, let the slaves out and give them a day off. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 167. Take a vacation. Take a vacation. Then we will lose another sum of money. The steward hesitated even more. It won't last long. Under Sarah's decision to take action, the laundry factory ushered in the most relaxing moment. The black slaves who taught themselves the Lorraine language went to the streets on weekends to meet their neighbors and make friends, and lived a relaxed and happy life. Compared to the Mawson laundry factory next door, the black slaves had a lot of complaints because they worked around the clock and did not even have the most basic sleep time. Sanders stayed here for almost a month without seeing Rose Hill. At her father's urging, she took Sierra to visit in person, only to find that the gate of the castle was closed and a layer of fine dust fell on the courtyard. Rose Hill didn't know how long she had left. Sandburn was also not interested in men, and now he felt completely offended. On a warm weekend, the people who bid farewell to Mawson Manor got on the boat back to the capital. Before leaving, she also packed a handful of gold coins for Sierra. Knowing that she was having a hard time here, she said, for a first-class ticket, you are welcome to come to me. The words were too ambiguous, and he almost asked her to become her lover, but Sierra refused with a smile. Just a few days after sending this noble lady away, another uninvited guest came to the house. A wealthy baron who came from thousands of miles away to attend the wedding was the blind date introduced to Sierra by his family. I don't know what kind of wind Xiao 11 blew in Lizzie's ears again to make him agree to marry her daughter off or to a widower whose ex-wife had just died. The family brought the two of them together to go out for fun. If they were interested in each other, they decided to settle the matter. Night. Sarah got into the car and was invited by Baron Layton to go out for coffee together. The other party is over 30 years old. When he smiles and talks, he has 3 deep creases on his forehead, which is not very good looking. What does Miss Sarah usually like to do? There is nothing to do. Sierra looked out the window, bored in every possible way. Lydon was not put off by her coldness and continued to look for topics with a smile. Investment? I heard that you opened a factory and butcher shop with the help of your family. You are a rare talented woman. Sierra turned her head. The light and shadow outside the window fell on her face. The shadows were clear, and the flaming red lips curved in a mocking arc. I need to make a clarification. To open the factory and butcher shop, I found someone to cooperate with me alone, and my father. It has nothing to do with it, and it would be even more ridiculous to say that the little pocket money he gave me was used as investment capital. My mother, Mrs. Clemens, has a large amount of property in his pocket. Layton watched the girl in front of him become extremely aggressive, and was intrigued by the wildness in her. He had played with those gentle little women so much that he found such a bright and beautiful woman very challenging. Sorry, I also listened to one-sided remarks. He asked the driver to stop at the door of a bar at the right time. How about I buy you a drink to relieve your anger? Eric had just finished a day's training and was preparing to have a late-night snack with a group of friends when he saw the petite figure getting out of a classic car. Sierra was only wearing a thin silk vest and red skirt. Her long hair was tied up and her neck was slender. With her outstanding appearance and temperament, she was a swan in this chaotic dark alley. When he saw her beautifully dressed and an old man entering a smoky bar, the corners of her raised lips immediately dropped and her brows tightened. A street prostitute wrapped around his strong body under the military uniform, her red-nailed fingers touched his chest, and her voice was seductive. Soldiers who are about to go to war, do you want to enter my jungle before you say goodbye? It's free for you. Haha, you have good vision. Eric will be promoted immediately. The partner behind him looked like you were blessed. Eric didn't even bother to glance. He held the prostitute's wrist and pushed her into his partner's arms. He patted his collar and said, I'm going to the bar. Going to the bar? Are you treating me? Yes, he responded without looking back, and stepped forward with his long legs in a hurry. In the dark and noisy pub, sexy whiskey girls were selling drinks everywhere. The pungent cigarettes lingering in the air made people very uncomfortable, including the eyes that fell on themselves, looking at the products, which was really disgusting. Sierra pursed her lips, knowing in her heart the purpose of this old man bringing her here, thinking that her 18-year-old girl had a simple personality and was particularly easy to deceive. In order to show off his wealth and grace, Layton booked a small box behind a row of colorful glass bead curtains, and also sold several bottles of expensive whiskey. Beauty and liquor, I haven't experienced such a life for a long time. Layton poured her a glass of wine and said seriously, to tell you the truth, Miss Sarah, I have been guarding my late wife for 5 years, but this time I heard Mr. Lizzie talk about you once, and saw you in the newspaper for the first time. He paused. It may be rude to say this, but I think I fell in love with you at first sight, if you don't mind my past. I mind. Sierra took off the lemon decoration on the rim of the wine glass and stuffed it into her mouth. The sour taste invaded her taste buds, which made her mind sober from the smoke. You can think about it. Although I am a baron, my family has a lot of assets. Whether it is agriculture or mining investment, my financial resources are enough to allow you to live a lifetime of luxury and worry-free. Lydon moved his hand on the table and moved towards the slender little hand that was also lying on the table, touched it. Sarah immediately put her hands on her knees, saying similar words to herself that she had heard from the dead Nelson. She raised her eyes and said, I don't know what my father said, but I don't have any intention to get married at the moment. I'm not short of money, and there's a big age gap between us. Seeing that she was still in such a noble attitude that she even had to sit on the north and south sides of the table with him, without touching her hands, Lydon's dissatisfied voice was kept low, and every word was slander. You will get married sooner or later. I don't mind that you once interfered in the affairs of Duke Rosehill and Miss Sander. Do you still dislike me as a widower? Syrah rolled her eyes inwardly, but managed to remain polite on her face. Who told you? I got involved in Rosehill and Sander. It seems you don't know yet, Leighton chuckled. The king has decreed a marriage to the Duke of Rosehill, and the entire upper circle of Whalley knows about your closeness to the Duke. He drank a second glass of whiskey, and under the influence of alcohol, his tone became more disdainful and frivolous. I don't mind that Miss Syrah has been a lover and her body is unclean, and you don't mind that I am older. I am really sincere to you. Ha! Syrah sneered. She grabbed the wine glass on the table and swallowed a sip of strong drink. The burning of her throat made her resist the urge to hit someone with the bottle in public. I'm leaving now. I hope there won't be another chance to meet you, Mr. Leighton. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 168. Injuring someone now would only damage her reputation, and she couldn't afford to do such a stupid thing. Eric was sitting not far away, and all the noise in the bar was amplified in his ears, and the conversation in the box was naturally heard clearly. He kept staring at the looming figure behind the curtain until a thin white wrist opened the curtain, and the girl with a beautiful side face walked out with lowered eyes. Eric drank the wine and stood up. Sierra entered the bathroom to solve her next personal problem. As soon as she washed her hands and went out, someone grabbed her arm and pushed her into the dark aisle. Smelling the strong odor of alcohol on the other person's body and unable to see the person clearly, she yelled angrily, "Let me go. You are really ungrateful." Leighton, who followed closely, leaned his head forward, exhaled another breath, and stared at the charming face in the dimness. "Master Lizzie promised to let you marry me, and I will pay Mawson Manor 50,000 gold every year to improve your life." His approach made Syrah feel uncomfortable in her stomach, and she said in disgust, "Go away. I never said I agreed. You are already mine, Syrah. You can't make the decision when it comes to marriage." Leighton looked at the red lips that were still colorful in the darkness, and with a thought in mind, he held her wrist a little tighter. "Now, let me kiss you, just once, and we'll call it a night." Sierra raised her leg to kick him across the span, but the other person's free hand easily suppressed her leg, and the sarcastic chuckle seemed to indicate that she was overestimating her abilities. "I like your personality," Leighton chuckled. Even when he was older, he looked like he was in control even when he was drunk. Sierra tilted her head and pursed her lips tightly. "If I had known, I would have smashed this bitch to death with a wine bottle just now." At the moment when Leighton was about to kiss her, there was a sudden bang in the darkness as the wine bottle broke, and the wine splashed, and a lot of it fell on Syrah's face. The hold on her wrist suddenly loosened. Leighton staggered back 2 steps, covered his head and screamed, "Who is it? Who hit me with a wine bottle?" When Syrah was dazed, an arm hugged her, his palm covered the back of her head, and pressed her head to her chest. The familiar smell of hormones on a man's body is like the pine and cypress in the early days after snow. "Don't be afraid," he whispered comfort, his voice deliberately slowed down to suppress his anger and impulse. Syrah soon knew who was coming. She hugged his waist reflexively and picked out a few folds in the straightened military uniform. "Eric." "It's okay, I'm here." Eric patted her back gently, his eyes that could see everything clearly in the dark, staring straight at the man holding his head and whining. He tried hard to suppress his anger and gently pushed the girl huddled up in his arms out of the dark corridor. "Wait for me outside." Someone opened the door and came out of the bathroom, bringing a little light. At this time, Eric had already taken off his military uniform and rolled up the sleeves of his white clothes. "Who are you?" Leighton stood up, covering his bleeding head and said, "Damn untouchable. I will send you to the police station and lock you up for the rest of your life." Sierra stood at the door, and some drunkards who were going to the toilet fled in panic. Eric's angry roar like a lion was heard. Which hand should touch her? Who are you? Your grandpa. As soon as Eric's rude words finished, there was the sound of flesh hitting each other, and the sound of water splashing after the wine barrel was knocked over. Leighton's screams were loud, but the bar happened to have arranged a special performance by the Whiskey Girl. The atmosphere was so high that no one heard what was going on inside. It's just that none of you can bear to give up, ha 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 ha, and you will be heartbroken when the ending comes out. Carrot carrot. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 169. Ciro listened to the voice getting weaker and weaker, and shouted inside, "Okay Eric, don't beat the person to death." The man grabbed Leighton's hair and lifted him up against the wall, just like he had just done to Cira. "You'd better be sensible and don't pester Cira, let alone threaten her." Eric's eyes underwent a horrifying change in Leighton's sight. A faint green light emanated from his pupils, as vicious as a wild wolf. I know, Leighton was trembling all over, holding the thick arm that lifted him up with his fingers, and kept begging for mercy, "I won't offend Miss Sarah." "Very good." Eric's wrist bones made a sound of bone twisting, and then he punched Leighton in the face. His last voice disappeared, and he collapsed on the ground and completely fainted. Sierra waited uneasily at the door. A tall figure appeared in the darkness, with a military uniform hanging on his arms and a white shirt stained with some rose-red wine. Seeing him sullen and in an extremely bad mood, she pursed her lips and asked, "You didn't kill anyone, did you?" After hearing Sierra's question about the man who tried to violate her, Eric walked up to her, and his oppressive figure pressed her head down. He lowered his head and said angrily, "How dare you go out with anyone, worried about whether he was beaten to death by me?" Seeing that he was blaming her coldly, Sierra pursed her lips, her eyes filled with mist, and she just said, "You are cruel to me." Eric was stared at by her foggy eyes, his breathing stopped suddenly, and his heart was instantly confused. He hurriedly unfolded his military uniform and put it on her body, hugging her into his arms and comforting her, "I'm just worried about you, wearing so little and going out with a stranger. What if I don't come today? What will you do?" The thought of her being kissed and touched filled his temper with uncontrollable rage. "There is no problem with this." Sierra couldn't do anything else. She leaned against his hard chest and said aggrievedly, "My father introduced me to my marriage partner, what can I do?" Eric had already listened to the conversation between the two, and now his aura had cooled down again. "The person is not dead yet, I'll go back and give him another punch." When he hit Leighton, it was like swatting a fly. Now he can help Sierra solve the problem with a little more force. When she heard that the person was not dead, Sierra relaxed a little, but when she saw that he really turned around, she wanted to go back and punch him again, and immediately hugged his arm. That's enough, that's enough. You can't do this arbitrarily now, it's easy to get into trouble. Let's go." The pull between the two attracted several men also wearing military uniforms. The lights in the bar were very dim, and they did not immediately recognize Sierra. They only thought that the girl holding Eric's arm was surprisingly stunning and beautiful. "Okay, Eric, no wonder I just rejected the prostitute's invitation at the door and insisted on coming to the bar. It turns out that I met her here." There was no offense in their tone, just envy. Eric glanced at them, put his arm around Sierra's shoulders. "I'm going back first, you can continue playing. There will be a girl's performance later, don't you want to watch?" They were cheering from behind, and he waved his hand without looking back. Shortly after the two left, another drinker who went to the restroom finally discovered Leighton, who was still alive and dead, and quickly called a car to take him to the hospital. Outside the bar, there are prostitutes standing on the street every few meters soliciting customers, and ambiguous sounds always come from the dark corners. Sierra lowered her head. The large military uniform could not cover her white and slender neck. A few strands of her messy hair fell on her chest, and the girlish fragrance mixed with alcohol spread out. Eric lowered his eyes darkly, turned around, and led the wandering girl into a dark alley that was too deep to see. The small leather shoes could not touch the light from the street lamp, and her vision fell into darkness. Only then did Sierra raise her head in confusion. "You went to the wrong place, Eric." She turned her head and looked at the street light a few meters away from her, turned around in his arms and wanted to walk out. With a gentle push, Eric pushed the person to the wall, and her arms and body turned into a prison to imprison her, trapping the person in the middle. The crisp breath penetrated the tip of her nose, and Sierra had a premonition that something was not good, so she went straight into a tipsy state, tilted her head and looked at him. "What are you doing?" Eric stared at her, and his voice was hoarse. "If I don't come tonight, will I get the news that you are planning to get married tomorrow?" Sierra was stunned for a moment. "No. No." He lowered his head, pressed his fingers on the stone wall a little harder, and the crushed stone fragments fell at her feet. "I heard Master Lizzie has decided to marry you to him." Sierra pursed her lips. "Of course I won't marry him, he is too old." Speaking of which, she punched him in the chest and said angrily, "Since you and your companions are looking for prostitutes, you still question me? That's too much." She bent down and was about to pass under Eric's arms, but he pressed his hand on her waist and pushed her back. "Are you jealous?" he asked in confusion, then stared at her eyes for a moment, then added an affirmative sentence, "Are you jealous?" "I didn't." Sierra tilted her head. Eric pinched her chin, turned her face back, and explained aloud, "I followed you after seeing you. I have never found a prostitute." "Huh, so do I. I have never thought about getting married." Sierra hummed at him, like a coquettish voice, with a soft and lingering ending. Knowing that she was a little drunk now, Eric, who selfishly pulled her into the darkness, leaned down and kissed her red lips. The kiss came fiercely, and Sierra was unprepared. She tightened her hand on the hard chest, and her heart trembled slightly. In a dark alley, a drunken man and woman got entangled as soon as they entered. A faint moan soon appeared in Sierra's ears. She huddled in Eric's arms, her face was hot, and she was a little overwhelmed by what was happening next to her. "Let's go out." She tiptoed close to his ear and said in a very small voice, "It's so embarrassing before they notice." "We were here first." Eric glanced at the small earlobe that was close to his lips. The blush on Sierra's cheeks spread all the way to this point. He couldn't resist the temptation and pressed his lips to it, biting it gently. The flesh on the earlobe was caught off guard by him and he took it into his mouth. Sierra trembled all over and her legs became weak. Eric supported all her weight and listened to the voice next to him, breathing heavily. "I just forgot to mention that no matter who Lizzie wants to marry you to, I will not agree to it. He will do everything possible to stir up trouble, and Sierra understands the meaning behind this." His hand slid down from her waist, followed the curve and stopped as soon as he grabbed her skirt, and even let his lips go to her ears. "You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 170. Eric knelt down, held her ankle with one hand, and his voice changed. "Are you injured?" Sierra didn't understand what he meant until a wave of heat surged out. She subconsciously closed her legs and said anxiously, "It's her menstrual period." When Eric saw her embarrassed and flustered eyes, he immediately understood what she meant. However, he didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, he stood up and closed her military uniform, picked her up by the waist, and walked quickly past the couple who were almost frightened by their sudden noises when they reached the intense scene. Eric didn't respond to the curses of the strange man behind him. He stopped a car very quickly and took Sierra back to the manor. She was wearing a thin skirt, and the large military uniform just blocked the embarrassment printed on the back. Eric did not enter the manor, but just watched her being connected by the servant. Josie, who was still asleep, happened to see her and asked a garrulous question, "Leiden didn't send you back. Whose clothes are these? Which soldier did you hook up with?" Sierra didn't bother to pay attention to her, and went straight back to the room to drag off her military uniform. What was even worse was that it was already stained with blood from her. She frowned and hurried into the bathroom. About an hour later, as soon as she lay down on the bed, she heard the window behind the curtain being opened. She looked up and saw Eric climbing in through the window. "Eric, I thought you went back." He took off his boots on the windowsill and walked on the fluffy carpet to the bedside. Seeing her face turning pale, he said worriedly, "I'm worried, so I came to see you. There was a bit of night breeze, and my stomach hurts a little." Sierra frowned in discomfort. Normally she wouldn't have stomach pains during her menstrual period, but today she felt a little uncomfortable because she was drinking and blowing the wind. Eric thought for a while, then lifted a corner of the quilt and lay next to her. "Come here." Sierra leaned into his arms as he was told, and quickly put a big, warm hand on his lower abdomen, rubbing it gently in circles. "I have seen Gail do this to Greenie before, and it will make her feel much better." His strength was just right, and Sierra, who was covered with a thin quilt, hummed comfortably, "Yeah, don't stop." Seeing how cute and naive she was, Eric couldn't help but kiss her on the forehead. "You just scared me." Sierra whispered, "I forgot the date, I didn't expect it." But she was also very lucky. If she hadn't had her menstrual period, they didn't know what they would have done under the ambiguous atmosphere in the dark alley just now. Eric also felt it was a pity, but he cared more about Sierra's body. "Go to sleep, I will stay with you." By the way, she pointed in the direction of the bathroom, "Your clothes are stained by me. I'll return them to you after I have them cleaned tomorrow." With his company, Sierra quickly fell asleep. Throughout the night, Eric barely closed his eyes. The girl's peaceful sleeping face in his arms made him reluctant to fall asleep. He just wished that time would pass slower. When the servant came to wake him up in the morning, Eric had disappeared, leaving no trace on the windowsill. The warm night still made Sierra sweat a little, but she was revived with full blood and felt refreshed. There was an accident when she asked the servant to collect the clothes she changed last night. When Eric left in the morning, he also took away the military uniform she had soiled. Thinking that he must have taken it back and washed it himself, Sierra's noodles felt hot. Today's morning paper published the news that the king ordered Rosehill to marry Sander, but there was no response from the person involved in the specific content. There was only a suspicious message below. The Duke of Rosehill won an eternal gem worth 50 million gold at a charity auction, which was suspected to be an engagement gift for his fiancée. In the breakfast room, Lizzie looked furious and threw a cup of scalding tea next to Sierra's seat. "Leiden went to a bar with you last night and was rushed to the hospital. His nose was broken and his hand was broken. They said it was a good thing done by a man named Eric. What on earth does he want to do? I don't allow you to have contact with a pariah." Lizzie completely exposed her discriminatory nature against the hunters in the mountains. Sierra moved her feet away from the tea stains, also picked up her own teacup and threw it directly from the table. The scalding tea splashed onto the back of Lizzie's hand, causing Josie to yell, "Sierra! You started to slap the blame again. If it weren't for Eric, I would have been violated last night. You don't care about my feelings at all." Sierra wiped her mouth and stood up, "But this is also what I expected, but now that Rosehill's marriage news has not been confirmed, you can't wait to let me get married. It looks so ugly. Why don't you marry Anna, Hope?" Anaxi glanced at her, then lowered her head silently and said nothing. There were deep dark circles under her eyes, and she looked like she hadn't slept well for a long time. Anna 11 is still young, Mrs. Josie answered first. Sierra sneered, she's a few months older than me. Anyway, Sierra, it's you who have a bad reputation now. Leiden is already the best marriage candidate we can find for you. You should cherish it, Josie said with a heartbroken look on her face. Your father and I did this for cut off your dream of marrying the Duke of Rose Hill. He is going to take a wife, and our daughter must not be a mistress. Sierra asked calmly, you can live out your life as a mistress for more than 10 years, why can't I? This was not the first time Josie had heard this sarcastic remark. She stood in front of Lizzie with a righteous look on her face. Your father and I are true love, whether you believe it or not. Sierra couldn't hold it back and laughed out loud. True love makes you be your lover for more than 10 years. Lizzie's face darkened and she was about to have a fit when a servant hurriedly came in and said, the call from the Duke of Rose Hill has come in. Anaxi's eyes lit up. Who are you looking for? You should tell me something. Lizzie covered her burned hand and glared at Sierra. He was about to stand up when the servant turned his attention to Sierra again. He's looking for Miss Sierra. Ignoring the frozen faces of the family, Sierra smiled and walked out of the restaurant to answer the phone. She pretended not to see the family members following her, picked up the phone and said, Happy wedding, Duke of Rose Hill. Rose Hill, who was sitting on the return cruise ship, slightly raised the corners of her lips. Did you see the news? Sierra glanced at the newspaper on the table. Ah, I saw it. When are you planning to hold a wedding in the capital? I will send you a gift. You're unhappy. Rose Hill looked at the gem pendant he just took in his hand, feeling good about it. So far from being unhappy, on the contrary, he was getting married, which was a relief for Sierra, but she couldn't say the words, so she could only pretend to sneer. Yeah, I didn't expect to hear about you again. You are almost a Sanders husband. She softened her tone and said, Of course I don't blame you. I am self-aware of myself, and you have already told me not to have any thoughts that I shouldn't have. The previous one has been reviewed, please wait. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 171. Rose Hill put away her good mood, spoke in a low voice, and explained to her as gently as possible. The number of new vampires in St. Warren exceeded expectations, and the hunt took a little longer. Regarding Sander, I have already discussed it with Huo. You don't need to explain to me, Sierra interrupted him, her voice unexpectedly firm and decisive. That's it, there is no chance to meet again. I wish you a happy wedding. Snapped. Sierra hung up the phone decisively, and there was a long series of busy signals on the other end. Rose Hill stared at the sky-high price necklace in the velvet box in her hand, and her face became completely cold. He took this picture specially to give it to her, but she hung up the phone without even listening to the words. Aldine, who was standing next to him, interjected, She is jealous, master. Rose Hill glanced at him coolly and put the phone back. Really? There is no doubt that women are so duplicitous. Rose Hill curled her thin lips, put away the gift box, and vaguely looked forward to meeting Sierra as soon as possible. After listening to her conversation, the Lizzie family breathed a sigh of relief. Josie said, Now that the Duke of Rose Hill has personally called to sever ties with you, Sierra, please consider Baron Leighton again. You won't want to live like this for the rest of your life. If you don't want me to mess with your wedding, don't bother me. Sierra walked straight past them. This weekend, she and Logozide had made an appointment to go to his house for dinner, so she had no time to chat with them. Anaxi has been very peaceful recently and hasn't made any mistakes. Sierra looked back at her before going out, which always felt a bit strange. Logosied's car had been waiting at the gate of the manor early. As soon as she got in the car, he clung to her and pulled her into his arms. What have you been busy with recently? I can't see you as soon as school is over. Sierra leaned against him, took his hand and held it. Something happened at the laundry factory. I have been busy with the customers over there. Mosin Laundry Factory. Luoxiet enjoyed her closeness and said, I heard that your father is competing with you for business. Do you want my help? No need. Sierra refused immediately. His help was usually to solve problems violently. Well, just wait, that laundry factory won't be open for long. Sierra looked at him sideways and asked strangely, how do you know it won't last long? Someone got sick at the Mawson laundry factory recently. Luoxiet lowered his eyes with a gentle expression, not feeling how terrible what he said was at all. It's an infectious disease. I'm very sensitive to these germs. Sierra was waiting for this to happen, but she didn't expect it to happen so soon. She pursed her lower lip, maybe it's tuberculosis. This is the infectious disease that she should consider first. Her mother died of it only a few months after she was accidentally infected with it. This disease is usually caused by high temperature and poor living environment, and commonly occurs in poor people and slaves, especially black slaves. They are transported thousands of miles like sardines in cans, and their bodies are in a sub-healthy state. With frequent squeezing, infectious diseases can easily occur. This is why, from the beginning, she has to give the slaves she bought a good and healthy environment. Sierra thought for a moment, I'll finish lunch with you later. Can you accompany me to the Mawson laundry factory? What to do? Sierra smiled slightly and said, trouble Dad's wedding. The car stopped in a busy market, and the two decided to go shopping together and cook together today. A new batch of gummy candies had just arrived in the candy shop, and her eyes were quickly drawn to them. Miss, the gummies just arrived today. They are flavored with honey, pomegranate juice, and milk. Please see which one you want. Have some of everything. Okay. Soon, Sierra got a paper bag full of gummy candies. She took out a piece of milk-flavored one and put it in her mouth, then handed another piece to Lucid's mouth. Try it, it's so sweet. The girl's eyebrows were curved and her eyes were sparkling. She seemed to be really surprised by a piece of gummy candy. Luoxiet leaned over and bit her finger, rolling up the gummy with his tongue. Regardless of the girl's face getting hot, he tasted it carefully and said, give me another one. On the busy street, Sierra's fingers seemed to be electrified. She lifted the paper bag and said angrily, you can take it yourself. That won't taste good. He shook his head and refused. Are my fingers condiments? Sierra reluctantly picked up another one and stuffed it into his mouth, pressed her fingertips on his lips and rubbed it. Luoxiet said with a look of enjoyment, yeah. Sierra, Eric's deep voice suddenly came from across the street. The corners of Sierra's lips that were still raised suddenly froze, and her hands retracted like lightning, her expression unable to contain her panic. Luxid, who had smelled his scent for a long time, kept his eyes unchanged. He put his arm around her shoulders and held her tightly in his arms, saying in a bored tone, why can't I meet him anywhere? The outstanding-looking Eric stood not far away, wearing a dark military uniform, clean and tidy, with a handsome face with a cold outline, thick long eyelashes half drooped, and suppressed eyes. Ruined. Dying. Help. Sierra roared insanely and in her heart, feeling extremely flustered. What are you doing? Eric took a step forward, his aura becoming more and more menacing after becoming a soldier. Luoxiet did not evade or retreat, but only firmly controlled Sierra to declare his sovereignty. Can't you see? Go shopping with Sierra, and she feeds me sweets. Sierra grabbed the clothes at the back of his waist to signal him to stop talking, with a clean smile on her face. Do you want to eat? Luoxiet just pestered me to feed it, it tastes pretty good. He forced you to feed him. Eric walked up to her, with mixed feelings in his heart and sour bubbles kept popping up. Yes, yes, he forced me to feed it. I'm glad you think so. Sierra almost blurted out these words and handed over the paper bag of gummies in her hand. Do you want to try one? You feed me? Eric asked. The look in Luoxid's side almost pierced her through. She chuckled and said, "Don't make trouble, there are so many people." Eric was immediately disappointed. He darkened his eyes, then picked up a piece of mint-flavored gummy and threw it into his mouth. It was refreshing and cold and not tasty at all. "Where else are you going?" Luoxiet curled his lips and said, "Go back to our house and make lunch." "Stop talking." Sierra's smile almost couldn't be stretched, and she quickly explained, "I didn't pay a penny for your house, so don't talk nonsense. What's mine is yours." Sierra paused, tilted her head, and her smile deepened. "That's enough for you, Luxid. Didn't you see that Eric's face was turning black, and that his military uniform could barely cover his arm muscles and he was about to hit someone?" "Eric," Sierra said proactively, "we just made an appointment to have lunch together today. Have you had lunch? Do you want to come together?" Afraid that this mermaid would take advantage of the situation, Eric stared at Roxt with a heavy gaze for a while, then nodded, "Go, I happen to go to the butcher shop to pick up some meat during my lunch break." Luoxiet's expression suddenly turned bad, and Sierra comforted him, "Be generous, we are just having a meal together." Although she didn't want to have a threesome, she could only do this to dispel the jealousy and sadness in Eric's heart. The way he looked at her just now was like an abandoned wolf cub, and she couldn't control it at all. The two of them stood on one side, tightly squeezing Sierra in the middle. One was heroic and the other was gentle and charming. Their beauty, comparable to that of gods, attracted a lot of attention. They both have broad shoulders and narrow waists. Luoxid looks thinner than Eric, but his silver hair that is as long as his waist swayed like a brilliance in the sun, dazzling many people's eyes. Sierra wanted to get out from between the two luminous bodies. This kind of attention made her predict that she would become the after-dinner gossip of the people in the town. Although she has long been a dedicated user of the gossip protagonist. "Eat less meat and have some fish," Luoxiet asked the aquatic product seller to pick up a fish. "You're so skinny, eat some meat to grow taller." Eric held up the meat he brought back from the butcher shop. "It tastes great with some toast." The two were tit for tat, and Sierra silently withdrew and went to pick some cucumbers and leafy vegetables from other stalls. Eric, who has been eating meat since he was a child, frowned. "Why do you always choose green vegetables?" "Because if you want to live a good life, you must have some green on your head." Sierra pursed her lips, "I'm losing weight recently." "Why do you want to lose weight when you're on your period?" Eric took all the paper bags in her hand. "I'll make lunch." Luoxiet didn't mind him taking all the things away, as long as he kept holding Sierra's hand. When the three of them returned home, Eric first looked around the house with disgust. There was no scent of Sierra here, which meant that she did not come here often, which made him feel a lot more comfortable. He carried the things and went to the kitchen. Sierra was pressed on the sofa by Luoxiet, and he heard him say lightly, "He can't come for free meals, so let him do it." Eric paused slightly as he walked to the kitchen without turning around to refute him. Seeing him like this, Sierra felt guilty in her heart. "You are the master and he is the guest." "I don't have this rule." Luoxiet curled his lips and smiled, his eyes slightly cold. Sierra had no choice but to sit with him for a while. When she heard the constant noise in the kitchen, she thought for a moment, then hooked her arms around Rox's neck, leaned into his ear and whispered, "Don't treat guests like this, huh?" The girl's fragrance and breath all fell on him. Roxide's hand around her waist tightened, and his breathing became turbulent. "You want to use this method to force me to compromise?" "Good friends help each other." Sierra stared at his white earlobes and suddenly thought of what Eric did to her that night. She leaned forward and bit the cool ear meat, imitating the imitation, and the sound of Luxid's inhalation immediately came from beside her. He pinched her chin, turned her face, and kissed her heavily on the lips. Okay, I understand." Sierra stood up and quickly entered the kitchen. The kitchen counter was a little short for Eric. He bent over a little while frying meat. His thick black eyebrows were drooped, and his profile was three-dimensional and deep. The midday sun coming in from the window cut the shadow of his face. Almost perfect. Noticing someone approaching, he turned his face, his brown eyes not seeing clearly under the bright light. "You can eat it now. Let me help you." Sierra stood beside him, rolled up her sleeves and went to deal with the leafy vegetables she bought. Eric didn't reply and continued what he was doing. Sometimes he had to admit that he really knew how to find trouble. The moment Sierra was in the living room, he almost pricked up his ears to hear what she was doing with the mermaid. His heart ached when he heard the word "true friend." "Don't be sad." The girl's hand suddenly passed through his lower back and closed in front of his abdomen. Eric's hand was unsteady and he almost couldn't hold the shovel. The subtle tenderness quickly swayed from his eyes. "I didn't." Sierra rubbed her face against his back. "You have it, I've seen it." At least this time, she was willing to come in and comfort him. Eric patted her little hand that was wrapped around her abdomen. "Okay, let go, oil will splash on your hand." "Okay." Sierra let go and silently walked to the side to wash the vegetables. She mixed the salad dressing as before, stirred it evenly, picked up a leaf and put it to Eric's mouth. He bit it and took her finger in for a while before releasing it. "That's what that mermaid did to you just now." Sierra nodded, not denying it, and was about to take out the vegetable bowl. The moment she turned around, she saw Luxid standing leaning against the door. He crossed his arms across his chest and stared there for who knows how long. "When did you come here?" Sierra almost dropped the bowl on the ground. "It's been a while." Luxid snorted coldly. The meaning was obvious, he probably saw it. At this time, Sierra could only pretend to be stupid. "Go out quickly, the meal will be ready soon." When the food was placed on the table, Luxid took the opportunity to sit next to her, opposite Eric who was sitting alone. In order to show fairness, Sierra took the lead in putting meat into his bowl. "You worked hard at lunch today, please eat more." Luxid immediately put a lot of vegetables on her plate. "You eat more." That wasn't the end yet. He raised the fork to her mouth again, smiling crookedly. "I'll feed you, ah." Under Eric's cold and formidable gaze, Sierra opened her mouth and ate the vegetables. As soon as she swallowed them, she heard him complain, "It's your turn to feed me now." Eric slapped his palm on the table, and a piece of meat on the dinner plate fell onto the table. "That's enough, can't you eat well?" His anger was rising and he was about to explode. "This is my home." Luxid enjoyed the other party's anger at him and didn't care at all. Sierra put her hand under the table and twisted his thigh hard, looking at him with a look that was begging for mercy. If this continues, she also wants to break down and leave. When Luxid saw her eyes stained with water, he felt that she was going to cry. He pursed his lips and said nothing in the end. A good lunch makes the person who eats it feel sick to his stomach. Fortunately, Eric's lunch break was very short and he had to rush back to the military camp after it was over, while Sierra also made excuses to rush to the Mawson factory. Before he left, he asked with a worried look on his face, "Don't you need me to ask for leave to accompany you?" "No need for Eric, I will pay attention to safety." Sierra took the initiative to tidy up his military uniform for him, and was dragged into the car by Lucid. "I posted it in a hurry, so this one will be fixed."